Good afternoon. My name is Capucine Sams, and I am a student of Chattahoochee Technical College. I am taking Introduction to ECCE 1101, the summer course. My professor is Dr. Taisha Hayward. My history presentation is on Henry Kaiser and the Kaiser Shipyard Childcare Centers. And I chose Henry Kaiser because he was a figure in history that I had never heard of before. So I figured that would be a challenge for me to figure out why he invented or decided to have childcare centers inside of shipyards. Prior to World War II, there were no organized childcare. It was basically unheard of. During this time, we had men that were away at war and women that were working inside of the shipyards and other facilities. And so, men being away at war, the need for fast production of the cargo ships, and by women being in the workplace, Henry Kaiser decided to invent on the job child care, meaning while you are at work and you are performing your job, your children will be in another area or sometimes in front of you or around you as to where you can see them while you are doing whatever is required of you for that day. Now, World War II lasted from September the 1st, 1935 until September the 2nd, 1945. So there were approximately 16 million men who had fought in this particular war. Henry Kaiser knew that he could not just have child care inside of the facilities without doing research. So what he decided to do was invite prominent key figures that were already studying child care development to his shipyards to basically get an idea of what type of programs and facilities that would benefit the workers inside of the shipyards. So the ideal of having on-site childcare would take away some of the worries that the men had faced being away from their families. Because they were gone off, it could be months before they would get any type of information or a letter or a telegram given to them and vice versa, and them sending it to their family. So the men basically wanted to make sure that their children were well cared for in their absence. So Henry Kaiser had several child care shipyards. Just to name a few, he had one of them in Richmond, California, and there was another one in Portland, Oregon, and they were all along the rivers. And so one of the specialists that he had come in was Catherine Landreth. She has her PhD. She's of the University of California, Berkeley, and she had set up the Richmond Schools program. And then we have Lois Meek Stoltz. She had her PhD as well. These are two well qualified people. And she was a child development researcher at the Columbia University of UC Berkeley. She had set up the Portland, Oregon child care centers. So basically the cost of child care, of course, we know we have never seen, not in my generation, child care being so cheap, but it was basically 50 to 75 cents per child, and that was a per day cost. We know that setting up child care centers, that we have to have certain things in place in order for them to run properly and safely. So not only do you make sure that you have the kids are getting a nutritious meal, you also have to make sure that the children are being well cared for, um, as well as also getting curriculum, because the child care centers were basically open 24 hours and the parents were working almost the whole time, not the whole 24 hours, but within their shift. And so because the parents are working and they only have time to break and get back to doing what they're doing. They had teachers that were there on site. So they were nourishing their bodies as well as their brains. But of course, when you're setting up something like that, you're going to always have some people that are not going to totally agree with how you have the center set up. And so they are going to voice their opinion. Now, there were several issues that were brought up. The first issue was the need for childcare for children that were under 2 years of age. And another issue was researching if children under 2 could benefit from a group setting if they were under the age of 2 years old. And so I guess they figured that, and this is just in my opinion, I guess they probably figured that if these kids can't do for themselves, or if they are not up and at least walking, that they could be a liability. Who knows? So, and in order to gather information about these issues, pamphlets were published to gain the opinion of the citizens. So after some debate, it was agreed upon that the child care centers would accept children no younger than 18 months old. And there was such a need. In Oregon alone, there were 904 children that were enrolled in that program just by itself. And so that actually began the publishing of the pamphlets, because the pamphlets had addressed many concerns and issues, and they were a source of information. They were they were like their newspaper for the families as well as the teachers. And the teachers purchased around 2,582 copies of the pamphlets, and they were 15 cents each there. So they had different types of questions in there, addressing large group in the nursery school. Should children under 2 be in nursery school? That was one of their issues. They were just making sure that they were meeting the needs of the nursery during wartime. They also had questions about who would need a nursery school after the war, and what were the teachers' plan be. And so those were some of the things that were inside of the pamphlets that were sold. There were many other concerns and subjects and information. They also had information about different recipes that could be done, and about nutrition and stuff like that. But that basically started the pamphlets to be published and handed out and sold amongst the teachers and the families that were in the shipyards. And so there was basically no federal government oversight. And like I said, the daycares were open all day and all night. And so what they decided to do in 1940, the United States passed the Defense Housing and Community Facilities and Services Act, and it's known as the Langhorne Act, which gave the Federal Works Agency the authority to fund the construction of houses, schools, and other infrastructures for laborers in the growing defense industry. And it was not specifically meant to fund child care, but in late 1942, the government used it to fund temporary daycare centers for children of mothers that were working during that time. So, of course, we have many different acts and bills and things like that, and funding that goes into our daycares and whatnot. And so that's basically parallel to what we do, but it's more carved out, and you have more government oversight when you're dealing with daycares, and how do they distribute the money, and how much money they're going to distribute to the daycares alone. But it was basically a must. It was a must in order for the economy to continue to run during wartime, because the men were off at war. The women had to come into the shipyards and other places to work. And so if we're coming in to work, somebody has to help take care of the children. So in closing, Henry Kaiser basically shaped our current child care centers by involving research and data for professionals to form these child care centers. The child care centers were meant to be temporary at first, but as we see more women who enter the workplace, the need for child care continues to grow, even currently. So making sure that the children receive a nutritious meal, as well as ensuring the children remain healthy. It shaped how we plan our meals and how we care for the child as a whole. And so, involving teachers and making sure that the children are nourished in their bodies as well as their minds, it takes the pressure of the it takes pressure off of the parents currently, because now there's a two you have to have a two income household in order for it to work. So that means that when you have a child at 6 weeks, you're going to be right back at work. And so it is very important that the child cares have rules and regulations, and they're funded properly, and you have the right people in there with the right education to serve the children. So he's basically the inventor of having child care right at your workplace.